He left me standing at the airport, like forgotten luggage, and that was the moment I stopped waiting. The wheels of the plane hadn't even cooled when I stepped off the jet bridge, heart tilted forward, scanning faces. I'd spent 6 hours in the air, imagining how he might greet me. Maybe a sheepish grin, maybe a "Hey, Mom," muffled behind a takeaway coffee. Instead, the only thing waiting was cold fluorescent light and the hush of strangers moving too fast to care. No sign, no text, just silence. The arrivals terminal echoed with the sound of high heels clicking across polished concrete and the occasional bark of a reunion, someone else's joy breaking the sterile hum. My own suitcase, scuffed and small, spun onto the belt like it had made the trip alone. I grabbed it and stood beside the sliding glass doors, watching them part and close like a mechanical sigh. My son, Adam, hadn't made a mistake. He hadn't been delayed by traffic or lost track of time. He had chosen not to come. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no messages. I dialed anyway, thumb hovering longer than it should have. Voicemail. "Hey, it's Adam. Leave a message." I didn't. What was I supposed to say? "Hi, honey. Just checking if you forgot I existed." Instead, I slid the phone back into my purse and stepped outside into a slap of wind that found its way through every seam in my coat. Snow drifted sideways beneath the orange glow of streetlights. Somewhere nearby, a couple laughed as they crammed into a rideshare, the trunk thudding shut behind them. Their joy felt like something I had once known. I flagged down a cab. The driver didn't ask questions, just tossed my bag in the trunk and muttered, "Where to?" I gave him the address I hadn't changed in 30 years, the one Adam learned to write in crayon when he was 5, the one he didn't bother to drive to today. As the city rolled past, blurry with holiday lights and fogged windows, I sat stiff in the back seat. My fingers curled around the worn leather handle of my purse like it might keep me tethered to something. Not sadness, not yet. Something quieter, something colder, the truth. Not the kind they print in newspapers or deliver in confessionals, but the kind that slides into your bones like frost when no one is looking. He didn't forget me. He never really saw me. Not as a mother, not as a person, only as a fixture, reliable, unremarkable, always where he left me last. And for decades, I let him. I closed my eyes for a moment as we stopped at a red light, letting the cab's heater breathe warm air against my shins. In my mind, I pictured him waiting for me, arms open, grinning, but it was a hologram, an echo of a boy who never grew up the way I prayed he would. When the light turned green, so did something in me, subtle, silent, but final. I didn't know then that I was about to unravel everything he'd ever taken for granted. But I did know this. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was done. They said I was generous, but they didn't know I was afraid of being alone, afraid that if I didn't keep giving, he'd stop seeing me at all. Adam was just 10 when cancer stole James. My husband went quickly, too quickly for goodbye, too slowly for mercy. One moment, I was someone's wife. The next, I was a single mother with a mortgage, half a pension, and a boy with wide, frightened eyes who needed more than I knew how to give. I filled in the blanks the only way I could, by vanishing behind what he needed. Double shifts at the hospital records office, night school bookkeeping to keep my credentials up. I learned how to stretch ground beef into 5 meals, how to mend jeans until the fabric was more patch than denim, how to cry in parking lots so I wouldn't do it in front of him. We never went hungry, But I swallowed every luxury, every birthday trip I never took, every spa day I skipped, like vitamins for someone else's growth. People called me strong, but strength has a sound, a breaking sound. It's the click of a calculator at midnight, the creak of your back when you finally sit down, the sigh you muffle so your son won't hear how tired you really are. Adam never knew that after I co-signed his first loan, I sold my wedding ring just to make rent. He never saw me use coupons to buy his favorite cereal while I skipped breakfast altogether. When his second app crashed and burned, I said, "We'll find another way." And I meant it, because that's what mothers do when the people they love fall apart. They catch them, even if they're falling too. I remember one night in particular. He was 24, and the startup he'd poured 2 years into had folded. He came home hollow-eyed, his confidence peeled off like bark in a storm. He sat on our old brown couch, head in his hands, whispering, "I don't know who I am if this doesn't work." I knelt beside him and pulled him into my arms, rocked him like I did when he was 5, and convinced the monster under his bed was real. I didn't say it would be okay. I didn't lie. I just held him until he slept. What he didn't see was me, hours later, curled on the kitchen floor with a stack of unpaid bills fanned out like playing cards. Gas, credit, insurance. My hands shook as I sorted through them, but I still paid everyone. I always did. For decades, I played the net beneath his trapeze, never letting him hit the ground. And somewhere along the way, he stopped looking down. That's the trouble with being dependable. People forget you bleed. They remember you as comfort, not cost. I gave Adam everything because I believed love was sacrifice, that being a good mother meant vanishing behind your child's future. But generosity given in fear becomes something else entirely. It becomes silence, the kind that hollows you out until there's nothing left to give but your name on a dotted line. And even that eventually stops being yours. I didn't cry. I clicked. The taxi slid into traffic, like a thought I didn't want to finish. Outside, the streetlights flickered past in smears of amber and red, casting long shadows across my lap. I sat very still, my suitcase pressed against my side like a tether to something I hadn't named yet. The driver didn't say much, just hummed along to a low jazz station and occasionally muttered at the brake lights ahead. My hands rested in my lap, fingers curled in on themselves, skin paper thin and chilled from the airport. Somewhere between Terminal B and the freeway, I pulled out my phone. Not to call Adam, not anymore. I opened my banking app. The screen lit up with that soft, sterile blue glow, clinical, precise, familiar. My face reflected faintly in the glass, older than I remember, not sad, not angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet you feel in hospitals and church pews when grief has passed and something colder settles in. I scrolled past the balances, healthy thanks to years of caution and denial, and landed on the settings. Account access, joint permissions, emergency proxies. Adam's name was everywhere. Secondary cardholder, emergency contact, listed beneficiary. Default inheritor on my trust. It hit me all at once, like stepping into a too-cold shower, jarring, involuntary. He hadn't just forgotten me at the airport. He had built his entire life assuming I would always be there, always cushioning, always paying, always giving. I remembered the way his voice sounded when he called me Mom, half apologetic, half entitled. Just a little help, okay? Or, you're all I've got. And I believed it. But belief is different than belonging. I sat back, the seat's vinyl sticking to my coat, and felt something shift inside me. Not loud or violent, just final. The kind of click a deadbolt makes when it slides into place. Not the start of war, the end of permission. I navigated to the control center. Freeze account access. Remove secondary card holder. Suspend beneficiary privileges. Each option blinked up like a dare. The cab hit a pothole, and the screen trembled slightly in my hand. My thumb hovered. Then I clicked. Click, click. Confirm, confirm. No confetti, no warning. Just a sterile pop-up. Access suspended. Pending primary review. The quiet in that car deepened. The jazz on the radio fuzzed out into a commercial. Outside the window, a man in a Santa suit smoked a cigarette under a busted neon pharmacy sign. It all felt faintly surreal, like watching someone else's life through glass. But I wasn't outside it anymore. I was driving it. I watched Adam's name disappear from one section of the screen, then another, then another. It was like peeling off decals from a window, slow, satisfying, and long overdue. He had filled my life like smoke, curling into corners I hadn't noticed until I opened the window and let him out. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't whisper goodbyes to the woman I'd been just an hour before. I just let the silence settle around me. And for the first time in decades, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space, like clarity, like breath. Some revolutions begin with gunfire. Mine began with a spreadsheet. I sat at my kitchen table the next morning, bare feet pressed against the cold tile floor, the scent of cinnamon tea curling softly through the air. My condo was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to ache, but now it felt intentional, like a held breath before a clean dive. The sun spilled across the papers I had spread in careful rows, my will, my medical directives, my trust documents, each one marked by my signature and by Adam's name, scrawled across every page like graffiti I'd once invited. I sipped slowly, then reached for the pen. There was no music, no angry montage, just the steady scratch of ink, meeting paper, and the faint whir of my old printer coming to life in the corner of the room. Remove medical proxy, revoke power of attorney, appoint no successor trustee. A soft mechanical hum followed each confirmation, as if the printer itself were quietly cheering me on. Page after page slid into the tray, warm and newly born. Every form was a small act of reclamation, every line a thread untangled. I remember the first time I gave Adam power of attorney. He was 27, newly married, full of plans, and convincing in the way young men are when they still believe failure is temporary. "It's just paperwork, Mom," he said, laughing. "We're family. What's the worst that could happen?" I hadn't known how dangerous that question was until the night he left me at the airport. Now, I was answering it myself. By noon, the legal folder was thick with amendments and retractions. I took a deep breath, clicked open my laptop, and logged into a site I'd bookmarked months ago during one of my sleepless nights, the kind of night where your body is still, but your mind is pacing. International Private Banking, Secure Client Portal. I created a new account. Primary account holder, Elaine Whitmore. Beneficiaries, none. Successor access, none. Withdrawal authorization, biometric only. The form asked for a reason. I typed, to protect what was mine before I forgot it was. Then click submit. A confirmation screen blinked up. No applause, no confetti. Just a line of black text on a white screen. Account successfully established. I closed the laptop and sat back. Outside the window, the world continued. Buses sighed at red lights. Children in backpacks raced each other to the corner. And an elderly man watered the violets on his balcony like nothing had shifted. But inside, everything had. For years, I had given pieces of myself away in soft, invisible ways. A co-signature here, a login there, a smile when I should have said no. And now I was gathering those pieces again, one signature at a time. I stood, stretched, and walked over to the printer, picked up the stack of warm papers, not declarations, not threats, just the sound of a woman slowly remembering she had a name before she had a role. And this time, that name would stand alone. He didn't say, "Hi, Mom." He said, "The card's not working." The text came at 9:42 a.m. My phone buzzed quietly, where it lay on the kitchen table, screen lighting up with a familiar name. Adam, son. 3 words. No greeting. No warmth. Just another problem handed to me, like I was still the family's designated fixer. The card's not working. I stared at the message for a long while, fingers curled loosely around my mug. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. Something colder was settling beneath my skin. I didn't open the text. I didn't need to. I could picture it already. Adam in a checkout line somewhere, designer groceries in hand, Tina probably tapping her acrylic nails against the cart with manufactured impatience, him swiping the card once, twice, again, and then the shift, that slow dawning embarrassment when the world doesn't bend the way it used to. He thought it was a glitch. It wasn't. I placed the mug down carefully, not wanting to spill even an inch of this moment. The weight of silence in the room was full-bodied, almost sacred. For the first time in years, I didn't reach for an excuse, a wire transfer, an apology wrapped in motherly concern. Instead, I reached for my phone. I tapped the message thread, not to reply, but to act. 3 dots sat in the top corner. I pressed them slowly, deliberately. More options. Block contact. The phone blinked once, then twice, and then his name disappeared like smoke. Not with a bang, but with the soft finality of a page turned. A tiny red badge flashed, blocked. That was it. No fanfare, just one clean cut through decades of tangled loyalty. I sat back in my chair, hands folded, the sound of traffic outside barely filtering through the windows. The dishwasher hummed in the background. Somewhere click-tick-ticked with the calm of a heartbeat, finally slowing. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought maybe I'd feel rage or grief, some cinematic swell of emotions. But no, what I felt was done. Done with questions. Done with guilt. Done with being an emergency contact for someone who never showed up to any of mine. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He didn't say, "I'm sorry for leaving you alone at the airport." He said, "The card's not working." And that was all I needed to know. Outside, the sun broke through a crack in the clouds, casting a narrow beam across the hardwood floor. It slid slowly toward the base of the chair where my suitcase still sat, unopened from the flight. I hadn't unpacked yet. Maybe part of me had still been waiting, just a little, for him to notice, to reach out, to apologize. But the message on my phone told me everything. He didn't miss me. He missed the money. And now he missed both. They called it elder abuse. I called it self-defense. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, like memories being filed and forgotten. I sat in the second row of the defendant's table, hands folded neatly, my pearl earrings, the only thing that shimmered beneath the dull fluorescent lights. Across from me, Adam sat stiff in a navy suit. I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Tina, in funereal black, dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue she didn't need. The mascara streaks were too perfect, too deliberate, like someone practicing grief in a mirror. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair and no patience for theatrics, adjusted her glasses. Her gavel had already tapped once, order in the room, and now the show began. Your Honor, Adam's attorney started, a young man too eager for drama. This case is about a vulnerable elderly woman who has clearly been coerced by outside parties. My clients are simply trying to ensure her well-being. Emotionally, financially. Emotionally. The word hung there like smoke from a cheap cigarette. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. Ms. Carter, my attorney, sharp as a scalpel in a steel gray suit, stood with a single manila folder tucked under her arm. She didn't carry boxes. She didn't need slideshows. She carried evidence. Your Honor, she said, cool and clean, we have no counter-theatrics to present. We have facts. She stepped forward and placed 3 neatly tabbed binders on the bench. Exhibit A, voicemails from Mr. Andrews requesting funds under fabricated emergencies. Click. The judge pressed play on a recorder. Adam's voice echoed faintly. Just wire it by noon, Mom. Tina's gonna freak if the payment doesn't clear. Exhibit B, bank statements showing thousands withdrawn. Mortgage, utilities, vacations, none of which my client authorized beyond initial consent. The judge nodded, flipping silently through the pages. And Exhibit C, Miss Carter opened a final folder, her fingers delicate but unshaking. A voice memo, captured 2 months ago. Quote, she's losing it. Once we get control, we're set for life. The courtroom went silent. Tina dropped her tissue. Adam's neck flushed red. I sat still. I didn't gloat. I didn't blink. I let the silence do the work. Finally, the judge looked up at me. Mrs. Whitmore, would you like to make a statement? I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my spine stayed straight. I raised my son after my husband died. I worked 2 jobs. I paid off his debt. I funded his businesses. I missed my own retirement, so he wouldn't miss a step. My voice didn't waver, but I never gave him permission to treat me like a debit card with a heartbeat. A low murmur passed through the back of the courtroom. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else shifted in their seat. The judge tapped her gavel once. Her eyes didn't leave mine. This court finds all claims unfounded. The suit is dismissed. Plaintiffs are fined for frivolous litigation. Tina gasped. Adam dropped his gaze to the floor like a child caught lying. I didn't look at either of them. I turned, walked out. The cold air outside hit my face like a baptism. Some battles are won in silence. Some victories taste like steel and freedom. They thought they left me behind. I left them behind on purpose. It started with a beep at the register, a quiet decline, then another, and another. I wasn't there, of course, but I could picture it. Adam standing in the express lane at the organic grocer Tina insisted on, his arms full of imported cheese and gluten-free crackers she didn't even like. The teenage cashier offering a bored shrug. The people in line shifting, sighing, watching. His card flashing red, declined. Try again. A machine's quiet rebellion. At first, he probably thought it was a glitch, some temporary hiccup. Surely his mother would fix it. She always had. But I wasn't fixing anything anymore. I was sitting at my kitchen table, a lavender candle flickering beside a worn paperback, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. Outside, the wind stirred the azaleas on my balcony. Inside, peace hummed low and steady beneath my ribs. The kettle whistled, the only sound I answered. By the end of that week, the final notice was taped to Adam's front door. Neon yellow, creased at the corners. Mortgage default. Immediate action required. The paint tore when he ripped it off in a rage. I imagined Tina seeing it first. Her gasp, her outrage, her stilettos echoing through their hollow hallway as she packed her bags, tossing silk blouses into overpriced luggage. No goodbye, just a hissed, "You said she'd come back around." She didn't even slam the door. She was too finished for dramatics. I blocked them both weeks before. But the internet has a way of bleeding. I saw the Facebook post anyway. Adams, late at night, half-cocked and begging for sympathy. Anyone know a good loan officer? Life's funny sometimes. Comments poured in, emojis, pity, a few thinly veiled jabs. He responded to none. He was learning what it meant to fall with no safety net. I turned the page in my book. A few days later, I walked past a newsstand downtown. Something about the headline stopped me. Not the bold font, but the absence of what I used to feel. Panic, obligation, that low, crawling itch that I needed to make it right. I didn't. I kept walking. By the second week, the utilities were cut. The house turned dark. The porch light flickered once, then went out. The garden I'd planted with him as a boy, long dead. The mailbox stuffed with debt and silence. And I was making scones. Apricot walnut, his favorite, when he was 5. Back when his eyes lit up at the smell of vanilla, not the scent of power. I didn't make them for him. I made them because I liked the smell, because I finally could, for me. Revenge doesn't always wear war paint. Sometimes it wears slippers. Sometimes it sounds like a blocked call, ringing into nothing. That night, I stood by the window and watched the moonlight spill across my kitchen counter, silvering the tea steam, rising in ribbons. I thought about the empire Adam had built out of my sacrifices, how fragile it all turned out to be. Like a sandcastle after the tide changes, he thought I was the tide, but I was the moon, and I had already pulled the sea away. My 70th birthday gift to myself? Freedom. No party, no cake, no surprise calls that never came. Just a one-way ticket to Hawaii, a worn suitcase, and a smooth stone etched with a single word. Closure. I arrived at the resort, alone, by choice. Coral Bay Sanctuary. It sounded like something out of a brochure from a life I used to promise myself someday. The air was thick with salt and sunlight, the kind that seeps into your skin and tells your bones to stop clenching. A young man in linen pants offered me chilled lemonade. I took it with a nod. My scarf caught the breeze behind me like a flag, not of surrender, but survival. My villa overlooked the Pacific, perched on a slope where the waves whispered secrets into the cliffs. Inside, white walls, soft light, long sheer curtains that danced when the wind flirted through the open balcony doors. The kind of place where silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That evening, I stood barefoot at the shoreline. The beach was nearly deserted, save for a child chasing waves in the distance, and a couple tangled in each other's laughter. I held the stone in my hand, gray and smooth, no bigger than a sand dollar. Eleanor had given it to me the night before I left. "You don't need closure," she'd said with a wink, "but if you want it, make it yours." I closed my eyes and thought of every version of me I'd left behind. The 23-year-old who believed marriage meant losing your name. The 47-year-old who co-signed loans she couldn't afford. The 65-year-old who waited alone at an airport gate. They deserved better. I whispered thank you to the tide and let the stone go. It skipped once, then disappeared. Later that week, I walked into the small community room tucked beside the spa lounge, where a circle of gray-haired women waited with clipboards and quiet eyes. I introduced myself not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had finally learned to guard what she built. My first workshop was called Take Back the Ledger. We talked about trusts, about power of attorney, about saying no without apology. We talked about guilt, how it collects like dust on a shelf, and how freeing it feels to wipe it clean. One woman cried when she realized she could open an account in only her name. Another laughed, dry and wild, when I showed her how to revoke her adult son's access to her mortgage. That night, I stood on my balcony, wrapped in a linen robe, the moonlight painting silver across the ocean. The breeze carried the scent of plumeria and something else, peace, maybe. I didn't toast to revenge. I toasted to clarity. The tide came in. The tide went out. Somewhere far away, Adam was probably still trying to log in. Here, I was beginning again, and I was doing it without a single backward glance. He sent a letter. Mom, I need help. I sent it to the Financial Crimes Bureau. No envelope had ever felt heavier than the one that landed on my doormat that morning. Creased edges, no return address, just my name written in Adam's handwriting. That same slant he used on birthday cards when he still called me Mommy. Inside, panic, dressed up as apology. I'm in trouble, legal trouble. I didn't know it had gone this far. They're talking fraud, jail time. I didn't mean to. I need you. There was no, I'm sorry. No, how are you? Just desperation, like muscle memory. I read it once, folded it neatly, slipped it into a manila envelope with a sticky note. Relevant material regarding ongoing fraudulent activity. Source, unsolicited letter. No emotion, no signature. Just a quiet record of cause and effect. That was the morning I closed my last U.S. bank account. The young teller tilted his head when he asked, "Reason for closure?" I smiled, slow and sure, because I'm done with people who never saw me. He didn't ask anything else. Now my name sits alone on my new will, no son beneath it, just a line of organizations, a shelter for elderly women, a legal aid clinic that offers free estate planning for widows, and a workshop series I now fund called Second Signatures, teaching women over 60 how to reclaim ownership of their own lives. I didn't build an empire. I built armor. Every Wednesday, I stand in a small sunlit room in the back of a library perched above the water. It smells of old paper and lavender oil. The women who come are soft-spoken at first, heavy with years of being depended on, dismissed, or drained. But by the third session, they ask sharper questions. They laugh louder. One brought a homemade pound cake last week. Another, a copy of her revised trust agreement with her own shaky signature standing proud at the bottom. And me? I sit behind a wooden podium with my silver hair pinned back and the sun painting streaks across my cheekbones. I teach from memory, not textbooks. I speak in used-to-bes and not anymores. We don't talk revenge. We talk refusal to be erased. My own revised will is kept in a navy folder tucked inside my writing desk. I signed it with a fountain pen, not because it mattered legally, but because it felt ceremonial, like sealing a promise not to leave the next generation of women as exposed as I had been. Adam will read about it someday, maybe in a line item, maybe in the paper, maybe not at all. But that's no longer my concern. I've stopped measuring legacy in holidays remembered or phone calls returned. Now I measure it in women who stand straighter, ask for help less, and sign their names with hands that no longer shake. I didn't save Adam, but I saved myself. And every time a woman walks out of my workshop clutching her own future, I know I'm not done saving yet. He left me stranded. I left him bankrupt in every way that matters. The keys to my old condo sat neatly on the kitchen counter, next to a folded note that simply read, "Thank you for letting me outgrow this space." I didn't leave behind much. Some worn furniture, a chipped mug, the hollow outline of a life once lived on pause. Everything I needed now fit into a single leather suitcase with a broken zipper I never bothered to fix. The morning air was soft and cool, carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus as I wheeled the suitcase down to the ferry dock. My scarf, white, sheer, frayed at the edges, snapped gently in the breeze, like a flag, not of surrender, but of survival. The water shimmered in shades of jade and turquoise, the sun slow to rise, stretching its arms across the surface like it, too, was waking into something new. The ferry bobbed at the end of the dock, quiet and unhurried, like it understood this wasn't just a trip. It was a departure. When I stepped aboard, I didn't look back, not at the city that took more than it gave, not at the life that had slowly carved pieces out of me in the name of motherhood, sacrifice, and love, not at the mailbox where I once waited for letters that never came. Instead, I turned toward the horizon where my new residency waited, an island property tucked into a curve of the sea, quiet and untouched, a place where my name was finally enough to open the door. The ferry pulled away with a low hum, the wake cutting through the water in long, patient strokes. I stood at the railing, scarf fluttering like a whisper to the past, and whispered back, "Today, I choose me." No applause followed. No dramatic music swelled. Just the rhythmic slap of water against the hull and the slow dissolve of the shore behind me. I pulled the signed lease agreement from my bag and ran my fingers over the ink. My signature, each letter formed with purpose. It was the first time in years my name meant ownership instead of obligation. He left me at the curb of an airport once, assuming I'd wait, that I'd call, that I'd forgive. But some gates don't reopen. Some planes only fly forward. And here I was, boarding not a flight, but a life. I didn't bring old birthday cards. I didn't pack guilt. I didn't carry the weight of what-ifs or could-have-beens. I brought my name, my silence, my freedom. When the ferry cut through the open water, wind in my hair, I felt it, something lift inside me, the last thread snapping without fanfare. He left me stranded, and I rebuilt the map. Now, every wave beneath me felt like a vow, never again. Not unseen, not unheard, not used. By the time the island came into view, its cliffs rising gently from the sea, its homes dappled in sunlight like they'd been waiting for me, I wasn't the same woman who had stood at baggage claim, clutching hope like a child's toy. I was whole, and for once, that was enough. Sometimes, the hardest part of letting go isn't the goodbye. It's the quiet decision to stop explaining your worth to people who are never listening. We spend so much of our lives pouring ourselves into others, hoping love will be enough to buy visibility. But what no one tells you is that generosity without boundaries doesn't look noble. It looks invisible. And invisibility, over time, becomes a kind of erasure of your needs, your voice, your name, There comes a moment, sometimes in silence, sometimes in fire, when you realize that being the strong one was never meant to be a life sentence. That self-respect is not earned through sacrifice, but reclaimed through stillness, through the click of a boundary held, the pause before a call returned, the refusal to fold just because someone else is crumbling. And when you finally choose yourself, not as a reaction, but as a ritual, the world shifts, not loudly, but surely. Freedom doesn't always announce itself with applause. Sometimes it arrives like ocean wind, slipping through open curtains, carrying only this promise: you don't have to be someone else's foundation to stand tall. And in that stillness, you realize survival isn't about holding on. It's about learning when to let go and watch yourself rise. Thank you for being here, truly. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength, or a moment when you chose yourself after being overlooked for too long, just know you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest victories are the ones no one sees but you. The boundaries you set, the silence you keep, the peace you finally claim. If this story felt familiar in any way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you'd like more stories like this, stories that honor resilience, dignity, and the power of walking away, feel free to like, share, or subscribe, only if it feels right. Until next time, take gentle care of the parts of you that no one clapped for. They're the strongest parts of all.